So probably most of you know why most divorce negotiations that tend to drag out, which is pretty much 80% of them, actually get to that point. Most of the time, it's because of emotions. And if people stepped back, took a look, I'm sure most people would agree that emotions often derail and drag out divorce negotiations. Most people don't realize that emotions and money go hand in hand. We emotionally spend, and when we're going through divorce, of course our emotions are pretty much unstable. And at a time in our lives when we should probably be making no decisions, divorce demands financial decision making that will alter the rest of your life. So I thought it was really, really important today to talk about both sides of it, what you can do about it both during divorce and post-divorce. At most Lunch and Learns, for those of you who attended before or seen the notices, I usually talk about the finances of divorce before or during divorce. Today, although we're going to be spending a couple of minutes on finances during the divorce process, I'm mainly going to speak to you about healing your finances post-divorce. So for some of you, you might feel like you're never going to be post-divorce or to post-divorce negotiations, but I assure you, you will get there. And so it's really important to share with you both what I've learned and what experts have shared with me as well. Okay, so you should all have the presentation. And for those of you who prefer looking at a screen, we did it last time, except they don't have a remote. The laptop's way over there, and it felt a little disjointed. So I thought this way you could write notes, and hopefully it works. So healing your finances. So remove the emotions. And on the second page there, I've written it 3 times. I can't tell you how important it is. Whether, you've never thought about it, or you're emotional during negotiations, in order to focus and make good sound decisions, your first step needs to be remove the emotions. If you bring the emotions into it, you'll make decisions that you may very well regret. I always give people an example. I was going through my own separation, and we had a lovely home, and I decided, our children were young, and you have to keep the house for the kids, because, oh my God, they might not survive if you don't keep the house. So I kept the house, which is essentially a money pit, and it was potentially not, for me, can't speak for everybody, the right decision. There's all the things that we never think about: maintaining it, fixing it, caring for it. And, for most people I know that didn't keep the house, the kids do fine. As long as they have some stability for a short period of time, ideally a year, they say kids will be fine. So that's why it's really important, because during divorce, people make decisions based on emotion. And I find women much more so than men, just because men and women are so different. So it's really, really important. If you remember nothing else I tell you today, take the emotion out of the decisions you're making. Okay, so a few tips for during divorce. We've already talked about removing the emotion from the decision making. And a follow-up to that is treat the negotiations as a business deal. It's just a bunch of stuff, whether you're worth negative something or you got millions. It's just a business deal. You're dividing it. You're determining how much income everybody's going to have. It should be no different than any other deal that you do. An employment contract, a business contract, a lease, etc. Treat it as a business deal and negotiate the terms that are best for you, but treat it as a business financial negotiation. And when you can manage, even if it's just for the time that you're in the negotiation with your lawyer, with your mediator, and then you maybe fall apart afterwards, still, when you're in that conversation, do your best to treat it as a business deal. You need a clear and strong strategy. So, and that's why it's, I always tell people it's really important to, talk with friends and family that are supportive, not that have the boxing gloves on, that are supportive, to meet with professionals that you feel can offer you support. Because when you embark on divorce negotiations, you really do need a strong and clear strategy. And unfortunately, and Louise is not included in this group, a lot of lawyers don't have a strategy. And that's one of the problems with why negotiations sometimes drag on. There is no strategy. It's a reactive process. So it's really important. It's kind of like, when you're going to the doctor, something like that. Sometimes you almost have to control the process. You really have to be in control and ensure that logical steps are being followed. And that's a really hard thing to do in the middle of being an emotional wreck. So that's why I don't expect that all of you can develop a clear strategy on your own, and you might need some help. Fourth, don't be afraid. Divorce. I always say divorce is like the stock market. It operates on fear and greed. It's pretty much true. But I would say that, and the important thing to know is everybody's afraid. Okay? Even the person in the relationship who's being difficult. Even when there's a lot of money. Everybody's afraid. Lives are going to change. Financial means are going to change. You're going to have to make different decisions. You're going to be on your own. So trust me, everyone I meet with is afraid. Men don't tend to admit it as much, but everybody's afraid. They might not describe it like that, but it's a scary process. So just know, do what you can to make sure you have the support that you need. But fear is not a good place from which to bargain. And lastly, don't make major purchases or changes in your life. I often meet with, especially women, they're selling the house, they're going to get a job, they're going to do their divorce negotiations, and their kids are going to switch schools. Like, all of those and managing all of those would be enough when you're not going through a divorce. But to do all of that in the midst of a divorce and is really, really, really difficult. Make it, to the extent you can. I mean, sometimes there's no choice. You have to go and get a job. You have to put out your house for sale. But do what you can to minimize change when you're in the midst of negotiating the terms of your separation and divorce. Probably a really good example, and I have Marianne's permission to use the example, is when her and her ex decided to embark on separation, they thought it would be a great idea to buy another car, because of course they were both going to need a car. They only had one, and so they went out and bought a car that had a big monthly payment, and decided that she would keep it. So it was not only a big monthly financial burden, but it was a constant reminder, of a decision that wasn't so good. And the day she got rid of that car, which was years later, was, it was like a weight was lifted. So things that, maybe don't seem like they would have a big impact on you, truly can. So, okay, and so that was sort of mostly what I wanted to share with you. Just some tips on during divorce. I mean, most of our lunch and learns, those of you who've met with me individually or as a couple, we talk about a lot of the issues financially during divorce. But those were just some of the issues I just wanted you to keep in mind when you're trying to negotiate the terms of your settlement. I often meet with people, and I've met with couples where they earn a combined total of $80,000 a year. They have no mortgage. They have RSPs, few investments, and really it's quite impressive to see how well they've done. And then I meet people closer to my age who are earning upwards of $200 or $250 a year. They have very little equity in their home, they have no investments, and they have piles of debt. So as I met with more and more people over the years, I started to try and understand how that happens. I mean, aside from thinking, oh, well, they must like to spend and they don't, I wanted to understand how that happens. So I started to look into the psychology of money. And it's really quite interesting. There's not a ton of research on it, but it's a really, really interesting topic. And over the years, although I maybe haven't been excellent at it, I've tried to keep it in mind and apply some of it to my own life. So, so there's a game that you can humor me with called the ultimatum game. So I need a volunteer. I pick you. You don't have to volunteer. It's really easy. Anyway. Okay, so here's how the game works. I'm the proposer. You're the receiver. I have an amount of money, and I'm going to make you an offer, a portion of that amount of money, and you can accept it, and we both walk away with that share, or you can reject it, and if you reject it, neither of us gets anything. Okay? I have $10, and I'm offering you $2. Your job is just to accept or reject. Reject. Okay. Thank you. I have $10, and I'm going to offer you $1. Reject. Okay? How about Rob? I have $10, and I'm going to offer you $3. Accept or reject.
On 4.
I'm offering you $3. Accept. Your job is to accept or reject.
What do you think on it? Get advice from my professional.
Okay, so basically, the ultimatum game was part of a Princeton research study back about 8 years ago. If any of you want to know more about it, you can email me. I'll give you the link. But basically, and funny enough, on the way here, for those of you who haven't met Sarah, she's being so kind as to videotape for me today. She's Marianne's future daughter-in-law, and a lovely young lady. So on the way here, and she, I have to say, her and her future husband are unbelievable with money. And so I posed that question to her. And I offered her $2, I think. Mm-hmm. And she said, I accept. So I said to her, wow, that's not the usual response. Why do you accept? And she said, well, if I'm sitting at the table and I don't have money, and you're offering me $2, I'd rather walk away with $2 than 0. Because if I reject, I'm getting nothing. So and I'm not sure if it's an age thing, or she's just really astute. But the interesting thing is, for those of you who rejected, thinking about it, maybe you change your mind, you're walking away with nothing where you could have had $2 or $3. And that is, just so you know, in the study, was the most common response, rejection of the offer. So, basically, and rationally, the receiver should always accept. Always, every time. People often forgo profit when they sense an unfair proposal. It may not be unfair. In this case, it was, obviously, but when they sense an unfair proposal, the receiver forgoes profit when they sense a disproportionate amount that the proposer is going to receive. What happens when people reject an offer? There's increased brain activity in the part of your brain associated with negative emotions, things like disgust, unhappiness, and brain activity in the area of the brain responsible for logical thought actually is decreased. So people are actually willing to sacrifice this amount of money to punish, in this case, the proposer or the person who they view as treating them badly. The part of the brain that controls the negative emotion can often override logical thought. So the one reason that I loved this study was therein lies the problem in divorce. In a lot of cases. In a lot of cases. I sit with people often and I say, well, we could look at it like this. And they're not accepting it because they see it, for whatever the reason is, in every different case, as unfair. So I thought that was a really important thing to understand, because logically, you should always accept. Always. Always, always, always. That's the logical thing to do, because if I was truly giving you money, you could have had $3, but you'd walk away with 0. So, okay. So, another issue in the psychology of money is every time we go to buy something that's, a certain amount of money in our world, the decision is spend now or save for tomorrow. So many financial decisions come down to the exact problem of, do I want to gratify myself today or have something in the future? And logically, you can tell yourself, not a good decision. But emotionally, quite often, our logic is overridden, and we spend money we know is allotted to something else. And so I just thought it would be really important to be cognizant of that fact. The research has actually been done that's shown that, like when my parents were when I was growing up, my parents, it seems, spent a lot more time calculating, the risk of expenditures. Today, we live in a material world, right? Children certainly don't do without many of the things my friends and I did when I was growing up. And we're constantly battling the impulsive versus, the logical planning of it all. And on top of it, when you're going through divorce or just coming out of divorce, you're distracted. Well, retail stores love distracted people because they bombard you with sounds and colors and, a whole mess of stuff, and and then they've actually determined that sadness also encourages us to spend more. So when you're going through a divorce or just coming out of divorce and not emotionally doing that well, we don't stand a chance. So I thought it was really interesting and just important to point out. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about post-divorce financial healing. And I'm going to go through some of it quickly, just so I make sure I keep to my allotted time. And if you have questions after, certainly I'm happy to address them. So, post-divorce, just a couple of things that I want you to keep in mind, and then I'm going to delve into them in the following pages. So, post-divorce, it's time to plan. You know what you got, you know what you're going to get, now you got to plan what in the heck are you going to do with it all. Number 2 is you got to rethink your attitude towards savings. You've got to determine what your money inflows are, what your money outflows are, and then you've got to determine what you're going to do about investing. So let's just talk for a second about each of those. Post-divorce, it's time to plan. I did this after my divorce. Stick your head in the sand. I have this much money and I'm sure it's going to cover everything. And that's funny, sometimes it doesn't. So, so I stand up here and I can share with you advice with the benefit of hindsight and what I've learned, but I assure you, I wasn't always the independent, self-assured person that stands before you today. So just like everybody else going through divorce, I had my own challenges emotionally and with money. So number 1, don't stick your head in the sand. And it's overwhelming to do it on your own, find help. Whether it's at a credit counseling center or at your bank or an accountant or a divorce professional, people help you with budgeting. Find some help, work with professionals. Rethink your attitude towards savings. So, and this was a big one for me, because I always saw savings as money I don't get to use now. But it's not. You can't view savings as deprivation. Because if you view it as deprivation, you'll never save any money. Because you feel deprived. And we don't feel that good when we feel deprived. You have to start thinking about saving as money you can spend in the future. And I know for myself, when I started doing that, I was much better off. I had a much better approach. And in the first few years after my divorce, it was a big issue for me. And I realized, I'm on my own. I got to start putting away money. So that's a big one. What is your view of saving? And then next, what are you actually saving for? Basically your saving should be allotted to emergencies, right? Something breaks, etc. Retirement, big ticket items, whether it's a vacation or a big TV or a car or whatever it is. And you should actually save. And there's some great books out there if you want to read them, which suggest 10%. They actually say you should try and save 5 to 15% of your savings. And I can tell you that for myself, the only way that was going to happen is I went to the investment advisor and I said, here's my RSP limit, you take that much every month. Because guess what? You don't have it, you can't spend it. And for me, for the first few years, it came tax time and I went, oh shit, I got to contribute to an RSP, and then I was looking at trying to find a whole sum of money. Well, that's not very easy to do. And so for me, it was take it every month, and I just didn't, then you don't have it. And people always say, oh, I can't do it, oh, I can't do it. You can do it. You can do it. Trust me, I was one of those, oh, I can't do it. It's so much money. Once you don't have it, you get pretty used to it. So that's a big one. I wasn't a believer in you got to do the automatic withdrawals, but that is one way that you will always save enough money. So money inflows and outflows. After the money outflows page, I've included for you my template to preparing a budget. If any of you actually want the electronic Excel copy, so you can fill in the numbers, etc., by all means send me an email, I'm happy to send it to you. It pretty much includes almost everything you could think of. You can certainly, if you know how to use Excel, you can add more lines, etc. Everything that money you could bring in and everything you spend. This is something I encourage my clients to do during their divorce, and even more importantly, post-divorce. Every single day, people are sitting down with lawyers, mediators, etc., and they're accepting support proposals and settlements. They could not tell you what it costs to live. I'm a money person, and when I was going through my divorce, I didn't even know what we were spending a month. I just knew, most of the time there was more than we were spending. So it's a really important step. Your lawyer looks at you and says, how about this much support? I don't know, I guess people just go, yeah, that sounds like a big number to me. Every single person I tell to sit down and add it all up, the number's always bigger than we imagine it. Every number you put on a line in your budget, increase it by 10%. Because we tend to underestimate what we spend. So just a couple of things that we were talking about. Creating a budget, it's the other B word. But I think in the last year, I always ask the question, do you have a budget, etc.? I've had 2 clients who are masters of managing money say yes. Now, I can tell you from my own perspective, I don't have a budget where I sit and make sure, but I can tell you every 6 months or so I sit down and I fill it out, and I know how much I'm going to have left over after all my fixed and variable expenses. So that if I want to do something, go away, etc., I know what I'm working with. Okay? So I'm not telling you to create a full-time job budgeting, but it's really, really important, especially when you first are on your own after negotiations, to go through that exercise. Okay, so obviously you got to spend less than you make, and if you don't, you either got to work more or spend less. So your money is going to taxes, savings, understand needs versus wants. I always explain this to my beautiful 18-year-old daughter. I need this. No, you actually don't need it. You want it. And so understand the difference between needs and wants. Retail therapy, it's not, and that's a common one after divorce. How many people do you know who go shopping, go buy the big ticket item? You'll regret the decision most of the time, right? It's instant gratification, and then it's, oh my God. A couple of just interesting ways that everything you read talks about is the latte factor. I sometimes sit with clients and we talk about how much you spend on Starbucks or wherever you get your coffee, and if it's $4 and you work 5 days a week, $20, $80 in most months, you know, do the math, you're around $1,000 a year. So, you know, when you're saying to yourself, I can't afford to save or I can't afford to go here or there, that's $1,000. That's a lot of money on coffee. So, and you know, the important thing though is don't deprive yourself. So maybe you decide Fridays is the day you buy coffee instead of bringing it. But that's a really important one. And also interest. Do you know if you buy something on a credit card and you only pay minimum payments, you're actually buying it 2 or 3 times? Yeah, I had a client sit down the other day and she said, do you know we've spent $40,000 on our mortgage alone? And you know, you don't think about it, but when you sit down and you like add it up, oh my God, you know? And you know, most people need mortgages. There's not a lot you can do. But it's really important to be cognizant. I've actually sat down with people who have outstanding credit card bills. And I've said to them, what's your limit on this line of credit over here? Oh, you know, it's about 10 or 20 more than the balance right now. And I said, well, why don't you take the money from the line of credit and go pay off the credit card? And they have some crazy logical reason why they can't do that. Because the line of credit's earmarked. I said to them, but it's 18% or 3.5%. I mean, you know, you really have to think what you're doing. The credit card companies don't want you to pay off your credit card every month. Just keep that in mind. Investing after divorce, right when you're done, keep it simple. Don't embark on some big master plan. For sure, if you're left with any sizable sum of money, work with a reputable investment advisor. Just a few tips. Money you need in the next 1 to 5 years, you don't want to invest. You need to protect it. GICs, savings, you know, and I'm sure not all investment advisors would agree with me, but I know even in my own investing, part of my money is earmarked in bonds and things that are secure. But I know lots of people who are investing money they need to live on every day. That isn't the money you should be investing with. Money you don't need for at least 5 years, you know, retirement money, etc. You're free to invest, you know, in as risky as your heart can tolerate, basically. How can you make better money decisions? You know, you need to establish, if you can, self-imposed limits. I don't care if you take, you know, this month on extras I'm only spending X. Write it on a piece of paper. I actually did this once. Write it on a piece of paper, put it on the mirror. Because, or tell your best friend, you know, once you spit it out, you know, and in the morning say it to yourself, you're more inclined to stick to it. When you're going to buy something that's a sizable amount of money, Marianne's laughing, you need a cooling off period, right? I didn't even know what the heck that was like years ago. And funny story, I went to buy a new car about 5 years ago, and I asked Marianne to come along with me, and we went looking, and I saw this great big SUV. Okay, keeping in mind that when I bought it, my son was already driving and my daughter was a year from driving, and this big SUV, it was really nice, and it had like a video thing in it and the whole thing. I'm like, oh, I am so going to buy this. Marianne's like, I might be overstepping my boundaries, but you are so not buying that today. You are going to go home for 3 days, I think it was, and if you still want to buy it in 3 days, you can buy it. Thank you. That was the dumbest thing I ever would have done. And I consider myself, you know, of average to high intelligence with money. But it's emotional, right? You get in, it has like beautiful leather seats, it has a video thing that would have been great when my kids were like little. But my son never drives with me, and my daughter almost never drives with me. How stupid would that have been? I would have had a car for 7 people that 6 other people would never have been in. 2 or 3 at the max. So that's just kind of an example of the things we do when we spend emotionally. And lastly, don't go shopping when you're tired, you know, after you've been drinking, things like that, because it actually saps our self-control. And they've actually done enough research to know that when our self-control is sapped, so if we go and it takes everything we can not to buy something, it actually saps us, and we actually have less when we go into the next store, which I never actually realized. So I actually now, and I didn't used to be very good with money, I now go into a store, and the old me would have been like, yeah, I think I'll take that and that. And I'm not talking about big purchases, but even little things, I now look at it and go, do I really need one more thing to clutter my house? And I now finding myself putting things down. You know what, I didn't really need it, and I don't miss it. So those are just kind of some tips. And if any of you want some great websites, where to go, I'm certainly happy to tell you. One of the other really interesting things that I've discovered is, which is much more common with women than with men, because women are usually in the position of getting spousal support. A very common theme is for women who get reasonable, sizable child and spousal support amounts is they don't work. They don't work. And in and of itself, that's not a big deal. But what they've actually shown, and people actually do research on these things, is now you have way too much time on your hands to spend money. You're spending way too much time going for lunch and in coffee shops, etc. And you feel a little freer about spending it. And they've actually, done research on it. And so I just thought, let's be honest, none of us would work if we didn't have to, right? I would go around speaking to everybody and, wouldn't care if I got paid. But the bottom line is, most people need to work. But if you don't need to work, and I'm not saying the day after you get divorced, but in the years that follow, it's not a bad idea, even part-time, because it does give you a lot more opportunity to spend your money. Anyway, I am over my time, and I'm going to get in really big trouble. So the last thing I just wanted to share with you is 10 really interesting tips I came across to heal the financial leaks. And these are just little things. And actually what most of you should do is actually just hire Marianne, because you would have a budget, bar none. Her potential to manage a budget, save money, etc. is probably better than anybody I have ever met. It is phenomenal. No matter what she's ever made through the years, she can put away money, make sure there's money for things, and she has a nice life. So, probably most of us should hire somebody like that. But just some 10 ways to heal your financial leaks. And one of the funny things she said to me, she'd come over to work, etc. And she'd say, do you always have all your lights on? Kids. She'd come over and have a 2,000 square foot house, and 10 of the 12 lights would be on. She said, you could probably save a lot of money if you shut your darn lights. So, but you know what? You don't think about it. So I started becoming conscious of it, and I would say now, I never have more than 2 lights on. Unless there's a third room, but and you become really conscious of it, and you'd be surprised how much all of it adds up. When you go to bed at night, turn down the furnace. Right? You don't need it to be 23 degrees when you're sleeping. So just small little things. Don't leave the water running. Every minute you leave the water running, you waste 2 to 5 gallons of water. So brushing your teeth, shaving, any other things when you're watering the lawn. Keep an eye on how long you're watering the lawn. Don't drive like a maniac. It actually burns more gas. Who knew? So you drive at even keel speed, which you all should be doing anyway. It actually uses less gas. And at prices today, it's a good idea. Try not to pay online shipping fees. So sometimes, if you spend a certain amount, there's no shipping. Do what you can to pull your purchases with a friend, a colleague, etc. Don't let gift cards go to waste. 1/3 of all gift cards are never redeemed. Right? I think my daughter has some sitting in her wallet. So, whether and there's now actually sites where you can sell your gift cards. Sometimes at a discount, but it's better than sitting in your wallet. Try not to pay extra airline service fees. Man, they charge for everything now. You want to reserve a seat, they charge. You want to sit in your seat almost, they charge you. So, try and do what you can not to pay $6.50 for snacks and that kind of thing. And it all sounds little, but when you're talking about $100 over the year, $80 over the year, Like it adds up, and pretty soon you're at 500, 1,000. Try not to pay for credit reports. You know, most people, you should be able to get one free one a year, and that's a big one. So try not to do that. Most people don't do this anymore, but try not to pay bills by snail mail if you don't have to. Right? You have 15 bills a month and you mail them all in. It adds up. Most places you can pay them online, and it is secure. Really, it is secure. Don't pay extra ATM fees. I'm a little bit bad for this the odd time. But, you know, you need money. Yeah, that's more convenient. Stay at your home bank, because otherwise fees are anywhere from $1.50 to $3 or $3.50. You know, you do that like 3 or 4 times a month. It's expensive. And lastly, which I didn't really even think about until a few years ago and that I now do, don't have low insurance deductibles. Your insurance premium is so much higher for things like your vehicle and your house when you have a low deductible like of $250 instead of $1,000, and you know the risk of something happening is pretty small. And so if you had to come up with the extra money, do the math, you'll be way ahead. So that's a big one. And when you're done your divorce negotiations, these are all the things that slowly over the year that follows you need to go through. You know, your insurance and your cable, and they all add up. I mean, I did that with mine. Actually, Marianne told me to do it. So, go through your cable bill. I didn't even know what half the stupid channels are. And if you phone them, you know, great to deal with. You know, ask the kids, do you actually watch these channels? No. And when you add it all up, it is really significant. So, I just wanted to spend our time, which I've gone over, so you can have extra time also. Just to share with you, you know, steps to take post-divorce to really ensure that you don't end up 5 years down the road. And I can tell you, even from my own experience, I am way better at all of that today than I was in the years that followed my divorce. But I had no one, you know, telling me all these wonderful things, and I thought I had enough money. And so, you know, you find yourself not having saved enough money and spending money, you know, where you don't need to be, and it really makes a difference, and I assure you, you won't feel deprived. So, thank you.